Good afternoon and welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining the Hong Kong Arts Administrators Association Cultural Leadership Summit 2020, and our theme is leveraging technology for growth. My name is Tim Calnin. I'm the Director of Kwun Arts, and I'm the moderator of the second roundtable session today, which is starting at 3:30 to slightly after 3:30 p.m. Hong Kong time, and we have 75 minutes until 4:45. During this presentation, the participants may post questions in the Q&A box. We'll try to answer as many questions as we possibly can during the Q&A session after our two speakers have done their presentations. And also the AAA will be recording this workshop, and you can please check on the event website for any of the other house rules. I'm very thrilled that we have two international guests joining us today. We have Kevin Sher, who's the President and General Manager Asia Pacific of Blackbaud, and Kevin is joining us from Sydney in Australia, where it's 2 hours later, so it's the end of the working week for Kevin. And we'll be hearing from Kevin a little later, but out of sheer politeness, I'd like to give a very special welcome to our other speaker today, who is Erin Koppel, joining us from Chicago, where in fact it's just after 2:30 a.m. And we're very grateful to Erin for staying up extra late on this Thursday night. And we hope that we'll keep you very engaged and stimulated with fascinating questions that come after your presentation. Erin is joining us from, is the Senior Vice President Consulting of Tessitura Network. And many of us know the Tessitura Network, unfortunately not from experience in Hong Kong, because there isn't an example of it here, but many of us have experienced in other parts of the world just how important Tessitura can be in forging a very close relationship between performing arts and visual arts organizations and cultural institutions and their publics and their stakeholders. So I thought we should really just hand over to Erin, perhaps introduce yourself a little bit more fully, but also tell us about some of the work that Tessitura is doing. Thank you very much, Erin.
Oh, thank you so much. Very, very honored to be here, glad to be here. I'm just going to turn on my screen sharing here. Hello, all of you. Very glad to be here with you today. I am also turning on my timer, so I make sure to leave plenty of time for Kevin's chat today with us. I'm Erin Koppel. I am the Senior Vice President of Consulting for Tessitura Network. And prior to working with Tessitura, beginning work directly for Tessitura 5 years ago or so, I was a user of the software as a fundraiser. My first career was in fundraising. For nearly 20 years, I raised money for Lyric Opera of Chicago, one of the United States' leading opera companies. And so I'm very glad to share those lessons in fundraising and in audience growth and how to really think about using, embracing technology and employing software in the arts. I lead a team of strategy and management consultants, of implementation and onboarding consultants, of business consultants, very deeply connected to our technology consultants, to really help organizations embrace technology in order to deepen engagement and generate revenue for arts organizations. And Tessitura Network itself is partner to more than 700 organizations spanning 10 countries, all of which leverage our CRM technology. I'm going to tell you a few of their stories today and outline how they've embraced technology and employed software in the arts. Some of the stories I'll share with you are organizations such as the Metropolitan Opera, pictured here in Lincoln Center in New York. The Metropolitan Opera was the first organization to use our software to manage their customers and constituents through our unified approach to engaging audiences and generating revenue. Tessitura software itself includes ticketing, marketing, fundraising, analytics, all the touch points customers have with us. And it also includes and can be leveraged to include digital engagement. This is the Philadelphia Orchestra, and you're going to hear their story in a little bit, but they use digital engagement to increase their fundraising revenue as well. One of my favorite organizations, the Royal Opera House, has an outstanding member benefits program, which uses personalized communication and ticket buying privileges to increase revenue from a very loyal fan base. And given that there are such commonalities around how customers are being managed, we're also able to do some regional benchmarking studies for ticketing and fundraising in our Australia and New Zealand region particularly. This, of course, is the iconic Sydney Opera House, who along with Australian Chamber Orchestra, Bangarra Dance, and Arts Centre Melbourne are much beloved organizations within our community. I've included so many of my favorite organizations, and without the ability to travel right now, just seeing them in photos makes me smile. I hope you've enjoyed the journey there. But you did ask me here to talk about how to embrace technology and employ software in the arts, leveraging technology for growth. And I want to talk about that in 3 key areas of focus. First, I want us to have a common definition of CRM, which I think is possibly one of the most misunderstood acronyms that exists. So I want to talk about and define CRM for you. I want to talk about the building blocks of CRM and how we can build a strategy with those elements of CRM. And then I just want to take a little bit more time to begin with customers and help you think about engagement with those customers very intentionally. Before we get there, I do just want to really give you the top line about why we should embrace technology. You know, leading performing arts organizations use CRM to know their audiences well. Leading performing arts organizations and the visual arts, as Tim said, and you know, any kind of cultural institutions really use technology to unify the organization to work together better. So the organization has a sense of shared purpose. Technology can provide that infrastructure for an organization. You know, organizations that are really thriving balance their customer acquisition and retention efforts. They're not always going for the new customer. They're really thinking about how do we retain customers and make sure that they are coming closer to us and feeling more connected to our mission, whatever that mission is. Finally, not finally, but what we want to do in order to make them feel that connection with us is to communicate with them as individuals. We really want to be focused on personalized communications. And then finally, and you'll hear this as a theme over and over again in this talk, which is we need to be intentional in our efforts to engage audiences. These are really the values of successful, high-performing arts organizations as they think about what they are doing to embrace technology. Now, I want to define customer relationship management for you. So maybe you think of CRM as technology. And if we were all together in a room, I would ask you to turn to your neighbor and trade definitions. And then I would ask for a show of hands to say, how many of you had the same definition as your neighbor? And there would be very few hands in the room. And so I just want to say, you know, this is the definition that we use for CRM here. And this is the definition I think that most successful organizations will think through. CRM is a philosophy and a business strategy supported by a system and a technology designed to improve human interaction in a business environment. Now, I didn't make up that definition. That definition was written by Paul Greenberg in a book about 10 years ago. And just to really drop out all the extra words, it's a philosophy and a business system supported, business strategy supported by a system and a technology. It's both things. And over the course of time, CRM has been sort of restricted to technology, and we have a technology focus. But actually, the technology is most effective when guided by an overarching philosophy and, of course, a business strategy. And when we think about that, this is how we think about that, which is that revenue actually follows engagement, all right? So you can see a 5% increase in retention revenue can result in a 50% boost to lifetime customer profits, and even more and more in other industries outside of the arts. We think about that as lifetime giving. We think about that as lifetime engagement. And when we're really deepening engagement, then that's when you're generating maximum revenue for organizations. So let me just think about that for a second. How do we do that? What does revenue follow engagement look like? Well, how we do that, to think about embracing technology and employing software in the arts, is we use a methodology, and the Sydney Opera House, for instance, uses a methodology which first embraces data culture. They understand that data privacy in particular is a tool which works for the benefit of all involved. If customers don't wish to engage with you, you don't actually want to engage with them. That's actually a waste of your resources. So thinking about data culture and thinking about how you can use data to guide your decisions. Then, and they next identify their customer milestones. They plan their pathways of engagement for their audiences to invite them closer and make possible for them to become donors to the organizations, not just audience members, but donors. And I'm going to show you a lot of details about that in the third section of my talk. They, of course, are setting goals and measuring progress. This, to me, is dear to my heart. It's one that I think many organizations skip because they're just focused on the short term and the next thing. But, you know, we could do an entirely different talk on that, but I love this one. Next, of course, they're thinking about their actions, right? They're determining the actions which will make the most impact for connecting customers to their mission. And finally, they establish priority. Given that we cannot do everything at once, and reality actually limits our resources of time and money, high-performing organizations that are embracing technology and prioritizing their investments in technology do so with an eye towards what can we do that will make the most impact. So that's CRM, kind of a very quick overview of how we think about CRM. So what are the building blocks of CRM? That's all lovely. That's all like big blue sky thinking. How will we really architect our way to get there? And in order to do that, you have to really break it down into the 3 building blocks of CRM, which for us are platform, people, and process. When these elements are very well understood, they're in balance, and they're in sync in an organization, you have the opportunity for great customer relationship management. Now, in order to actually do that, achieve the alignment and the balance of these different elements, you need to master your understanding of them as individual elements, right? Lots of times people will come and say, oh, our platform doesn't, or our platform, we wish that. And people are using platforms to solve actually organizational process problems. And once you sort out the process, the platform can support that. We think about that though first when it comes to people. When you think about the building blocks of customer relationship management, you're thinking about the people in your organization. Remember how I said it's strategy and technology? The people have to have the right vision, skills, and attitude to build and manage effective processes and select and configure the right platforms. And so we are thinking of the people in the organization, the ones who are deciding the vision, deciding the goals, managing that strategy. They have to have the right vision, skills, and attitude to build effective process and select and configure platform. All right, let's talk about process. Process really encompasses all the organizational strategy and tactics designed to connect customers to the mission of your organization. Now, process should evolve and it should take advantage of new opportunities by turning ideas into action. That's what great process does. It's streamlined, it's not heavy. It just moves an organization forward towards its goals. And then finally, platform. Platform, of course, is the foundational infrastructure of CRM, serving as an enabler of organizational goals. Platforms operationalize your strategies, and they track progress towards achieving your goals. So when we line these elements up, people with the right vision, skills, and attitude to build and manage effective process and grow and configure the right platforms. Process is evolving to take advantage of new opportunities by prioritization and bringing ideas into action. And then finally, platforms operationalize those strategies and track progress towards achieving your goals. So when we think about that, use the CRM elements of people, platform, and process to manage data privacy. That's something very important. I've got a picture here of the Royal Opera House. And when we think about the Royal Opera House managing data privacy, obviously they have massive regulations and infrastructure in place around GDPR, right? They've just gone through a massive data privacy couple of years there. And now that it's all in place, everyone knows what to expect. Everyone understands how to manage that data privacy as an effective tool within their CRM strategies, actually. So then, of course, we're using these elements to achieve business goals and operationalize customer engagement strategy. So that last part, operationalize customer engagement strategy. It's really important. And this is beginning with customers and engage intentionally. So we're moving through our talk about how to embrace technology and employ software in the arts. This is actually the order in which you need to focus. You need to understand CRM, you need to understand the building blocks, the elements of CRM, and then you need to begin with your customers. So CRM begins with customers. Customers, actually. And this is really important because we believe that great customer relationship management really should identify and begin with a customer in mind. Lots of times we think about groups of customers, and that's lovely, that's terrific. But really when you're thinking at its most basic level, you have to think about an individual customer themselves. And so really at its most basic, customer relationship management is moving people from being an unknown customer to a known customer, all right? So an unknown customer might mean that you are someone who attends with a friend, attends an organization, you know, is a ghost purchaser, all right? So I buy the tickets for myself and a friend to attend. So I have 2 tickets, right? And I stepped forward, and you know me because I have self-identified. Here's my name, here's my payment information, here's everything about me. I'm known, I want to talk with you. That's what consent is. It's a very important element in data privacy is, do you have consent to be speaking and interacting with them? All the way through unknown, through all the way a known consenting customer. When we think about this, each of these boxes represents a milestone, right? And each of these boxes, and I'm going to show you a customer engagement roadmap in a minute, but the important part of this is to think of each of these boxes as being a milestone, a progression of deepened engagement where you are learning more about the customer, and they are also, at this point, just self-identifying, but becoming more loyal to you. And CRM is actually driving this process forward. Let me give you an example. So if you have a first-time ticket buyer, and what you want from that first-time ticket buyer is for them to create an email subscription, right? You want to bring them in, and then you want to start communicating with them. Well, what can sometimes happen in organizations where those building blocks of people, process, and platform aren't in sync and there are no shared goals is that every time, oh, there's a first-time ticket buyer, so what happens? They get a ticket offer, they get a program offer, they get an education offer, they get a membership offer, and they get an annual fund ask. And we call this 5 ways to ruin a relationship, actually, because really the customer is totally confused by all of this amount of communication. And so what this has resulted in, how this happens, is organizations individually have plans for what they're trying to do. We want to take a non-attendee all the way to a regular attender. We want a person to become a subscriber, a member, and then have them renew. Education's got a plan. Fundraising has a different plan. But when we go back and we think about, at its most simple, what are we trying to do with our customers? Departments need to unite around what progressive engagement looks like. How do we really expect customers to move from point to point to point, right? We need to craft for them a logical path of engagement. So when you think about a customer engagement roadmap, this is obviously a very basic example, but you start with a transactional non-attendee up here in the top left. Then you move into maybe into the green space where they're just becoming a subscriber or a member, those green boxes. And then you become a philanthropic, you have a philanthropic donor mindset, and you're in the purple. And that can look, you know, any kind of different ways, right? Now, given that we all can't be together, we have digital customer engagement roadmaps. And as we think about that, all of that is pretty new and very much important in this particular set of circumstances we're in. And so we think about a digital entry point versus physical entry points. What does that even mean to us right now? And maybe right now we can't actually do any of the subscription things. And so we're moving people towards from digital all the way to straight into donors. So when we go back to how do we embrace technology and employ software in the arts, you want to create that customer engagement roadmap to outline important milestones, progressively deepen engagement with audiences, and then assign goals to those milestones and track progress to them. You know, this photo is actually of the Philadelphia Orchestra. They closed, as did many organizations, on 13 March in the States. But they already had a performance prepared for that night. So they canceled the audience attending the performance and actually broadcast it live on Facebook. I was one of the members watching, members of the audience watching on my phone with 5,000 other people. And what they have, because they are so effective at using our technology and having great strategy for CRM, they've been able to use Tessitura's analytics platforms to understand that what they now stream live has an absolute direct impact on the revenue donated in support of their organizations. But that's because they already had the infrastructure set in place to be able to do that. So if we just go back to this, knowing your audience well, working together, balancing your efforts, communicating with your audiences, thinking about being intentional, this to us is how to embrace technology and employ software in the arts. Thank you for inviting us. I hope I've given you something to think about. I look forward to hearing Kevin's talk, and I look forward to your questions at the end of the session. Thank you so much.
Erin, that's wonderful. Thank you. That's a really great overview of the full scope of the kind of work that you're doing, and I think it's given a lot of us a lot of food for thought. Before we get on to Kevin's presentation, I had a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. I'm curious to know about the various touch points that you have with the public as you mapped it out. I love that idea of the non-attendee and the different pathways into the process. A couple of questions I had for you. One thing was, how does that is there some kind of pathway that starts with education programs?
Sure.
And kind of transitions people through to kind of main stage or mainstream audiences. I'm just conscious that there is in many cases education programs, your key point of contact is the teacher or the school, and therefore you don't have the opportunity to develop the direct relationship with the individuals who you hope in the future will become your regular attendees. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, you know, the reality is that when we think about education, and when you think about, especially when you think about this, let's take dance as an industry, right? You have many tiny dancers, you know, students who are 5 years old in their tutus, really dancing. You know, we all have the pictures in our mind. You know, you have the information of the parents in that case, right? You have the information of the attendee. The 5-year-old probably doesn't have their own account within your CRM. And so CRM should be able to follow along with that, that individual from the beginning when they are the tiny dancer all the way through when they are purchasing dance tickets. Great CRM can do that. Now, the reality is that in the time of students who attend with their classrooms, the connection is actually with the teacher. The teacher then is the connection to you. You're deepening engagement with that teacher, so the teacher continues to bring in those classes. The point of self-identification for a student might be when they start to join your young professionals group or become a young patron, something like that. It's when they self-identify that you are thinking of. That's the moment that you're capturing. And yes, those 2 examples I gave you, we do very detailed maps for just education engagement, for just digital engagement. You know, you can apply that concept through whichever piece you're looking at to join it all up together. We do a lot of that work, for sure.
And then there was another word that came up in your presentation that, you know, in the actually throughout my entire career, which has mostly been in the performing arts, this whole question of subscribers and the subscription model has been something that, you know, most organizations are deeply stressed about, because the perception is that, you know, the subscription model is no longer relevant. It may have been something that was, you know, the foundation of audience development in the mid-20th century, but you know, current audience behavior does not transition people from the single ticket buyer to the subscriber the way it used to. Now, I don't know. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah. So we all know that book, Subscribe Now, and that was written by Danny Newman. And that was the foundation. I actually worked with him at Lyric Opera of Chicago. That was the foundation of this idea that subscriptions are the almighty. Subscriptions as a vehicle allow for organizations to plan their revenue, right? That's ultimately why we want a pre-purchased group of things so that we can plan our revenue accordingly. The reality is that customer behaviors and purchases they don't work like that anymore. And so we've seen the most success in subscription models as they evolve towards, for instance, a voucher system where you're buying 8 things at a discount, but you can redeem these vouchers across our offerings as the offerings become available. That, I think, is the future evolution of an old subscription model, where you're able to offer them a discount, get a package kind of purchase without fixed dates, fixed seats, you know, those sorts of benefits which people don't care about.
Possibly you learn more about them from how they go about redeeming those 8 vouchers.
That's exactly right. Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Erin. Now, I'm keeping a very strict eye on the time. So I think we're almost exactly on time. So I'd now like to switch time zones and land in Sydney at 6:02 p.m. And invite Kevin Sher to give us his presentation. So Kevin, over to you.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yep, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, well, it is fantastic to be here, and thank you for allowing me to speak at this event. I just wanted to say thank you to Erin as well. You presented CRM and the concepts of CRM in an absolutely superb way, and I don't think there's any possible way I could have repeated what you've done. So you've done a huge credit to the audience. I'm going to take a slightly different approach today and maybe just share some some examples and ideas for you to take away, perhaps to implement immediately or over the next however long you choose to. But first, let me do a brief introduction to myself, and just making sure I can move through my slides here. I am Kevin Sher, Managing Director and President of Blackbaud Pacific in Asia Pacific. Our geography is quite broad, India through China, Japan, all the way to New Zealand. So we represent 2/3 of the world's population, but not, well, unfortunately, not 2/3 of the world's philanthropy. So we are a smaller operating unit in Blackbaud than the rest of our peers in Europe and in North America. I've been with the company for 12 years, quite a while, based in Sydney with my family. And I am a huge fan of Hong Kong and Singapore and the various regions. And the biggest challenge I've had over the last several months is not being able to travel to your neck of the woods, which is my favorite thing to do, in part because I'm a big tea drinker, and obviously there is no better place in the world to buy tea than in Hong Kong and Singapore. Blackbaud itself is a huge provider of technology to the arts and cultural sector. We work with over 2,200 arts and cultural organizations around the world. And they range from some of the largest organizations in the world, the Tate Modern in London, all the way to really small local arts and cultural organizations. And all of these organizations have, one thing in common. They need to survive, and they need to provide a service to their constituents. But they do have challenges. And Blackbaud, along with its partners, do a lot of work in benchmarking trends in the arts and cultural sector. And unfortunately for the sector, it has had a flattened downward trend in income, and particularly voluntary income over the last few years, since 2014 in particular. And a lot of pundits and fundraising experts wonder why that is. Part of it, they have termed cultural promiscuity, which is an interesting term, but I think it goes back to some of the comments earlier about pinning down people and getting individuals to be loyal to one cultural organization and not to be moving around and providing their support to multiple organizations. And of course, it's impossible to talk about arts and culture today without referencing COVID and the current pandemic. This is a slide that we produce at Blackbaud that tracks arts and cultural giving on a monthly basis, actually, across those 2,200 organizations. And we compare it to our overall giving index. So that you can see that, interestingly enough, arts and cultural organizations don't fare well generally in Christmas appeals, which you can see there. But they have done okay, but not great, relative to the general index through the pandemic. And this is voluntary income. When you look at earned income, the story is dramatically different. And there have been drastic changes in technology and the landscape around technology that have fundamentally changed the way organizations like yours, arts and cultural organizations, engage with the marketplace. But from Blackbaud's perspective, we've found that while many organizations embrace all of the things that Erin talked about and all of the positive aspects of CRM, there is a gap. There is something missing in their use of digital and commercial technologies to drive innovation. And we think there's ample room for innovation. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that you may want to do to innovate in a technology perspective. And I'm going to bring it all back to CRM, but albeit very briefly. But I will say that it is up to you as organizations to reassert the purpose that you have in this complex world so that you can engage your constituents in a much more meaningful way. And that has to change, obviously, with COVID and the assumption, the strong assumption that arts and cultural organizations are not going to be the same moving forward. And that's in part because some of the successful things that these organizations have done, particularly in North America, have opened their eyes. Like they've had to experiment, they've had to try and do different things, and they've got amazing results in some cases. So you're going to see a dramatic change in the way organizations engage with technology to service their constituents and provide value from whatever mission that they have. Because in reality, this is what's happening in the arts and cultural world. It's a metaphor, but this is a museum which interestingly has old masters on the walls, but nobody physically there at the museum. And that's a real problem for this museum because it has earned income like many of you have, either ticket sales, membership, subscriptions, shop sales, entry fees, and earned income has plummeted. And our view, and certainly the view of many of our customers in North America based on survey results, is that earned income is going to be a significantly decreased income stream relative to voluntary income in the future. And so it's important that you think about technology to improve the way you generate voluntary income. And so I ask you all a question today that you may want to jot down or talk to your colleagues about if you were in a physical environment and compare notes. But the question is, what percentage of your organization's income comes from traditional earned income, tickets, membership, gift shops? And in North America, that is, in most cases, on average across the sector, over 65%. And if that decreases significantly, you really have two options left for you. You have option one, which is to increase voluntary income from donations and potentially government funding, of course, but that's hard. Or you have to create innovative ways to generate earned income. So what I'm going to talk about today is a couple of things. Firstly, I want to talk to you about how do you attract people to your organization using technology in a more remote manner. I will focus on that. I'll also focus a little bit on how technology can help you ask more people for more relevant donations. I'll tie that back to CRM, and then I'll talk a little bit about culture, which Erin did mention, and we also agree is critical to the success of any CRM or technology project. So firstly, how do you attract and engage your audience in this digital world using technology? And so I'm going to go through a few examples today and touch on just a couple of key themes that through our research, we found our customers are embracing more and more. And now some of these things have absolutely nothing to do with the solutions that we offer at Blackbaud, which is fundraising CRM solutions. But for the sake of the audience, I thought it would be interesting, and these are things that have certainly resonated in the North American and European marketplaces. So I hope it's useful. The first one is one that I absolutely think is fantastic, and I think many of you have probably heard about this or read about it, but if you have not, it is something to really investigate. This is the Louvre, and it has obviously some famous pictures, including the Mona Lisa, and it had a real challenge engaging its younger constituents and people who couldn't actually enter into the facility to see the Mona Lisa. And so in 2019, they created a virtual reality experience for the Mona Lisa. And this has two really unique value points. One is that it dramatically increased engagement between the audience, potential audience, and the most valuable, arguably, asset that the Louvre has. They saw a massive increase in people engaging with the story of the Mona Lisa and the story around the Mona Lisa. And so what they've done in COVID times, as you probably guess, is taken that experience and made it completely remote. So you don't need to even be at the venue to engage. You can engage remotely through a variety of virtual reality tools. And it's allowed them in this time where people cannot visit the Louvre to engage their constituents, attract additional constituents, and create a really unique experience. So my first item to share is virtual reality is an absolute must, no matter what types of arts and cultural institution you are working for. You must think about how you can engage virtual reality to support your education mission. The second one, and again, this is COVID related, but and again, since the zoo opened up, what we've been told is that there has been absolutely no slowdown in this innovative idea, which was generated from COVID and can apply again to many different arts and cultural institutions. This is a zoo example, but I'll give you a couple of additional examples in a second. But this zoo did something amazing. You do not have to go to the zoo to actually engage with the animals. You can sign up for a safari with a hippo or an elephant or a whole range of other animals at the zoo. And I know you're thinking this cannot be relevant for my arts and cultural organization, but stay tuned. There's a couple of more examples. But not only has this allowed the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden to engage more constituents, but as you can imagine, it's broadened their geographic coverage, right? Because now anyone, anywhere in the world can be engaged with the Cincinnati Zoo. There's no time zone limits. There's no geographic limits. And you could sign up. And what the zoo then has, once they've signed you up, is they have a relationship with you. They know who you are, but not only that, they know that you may like hippos, which is a really good thing to know, or elephants for that matter. Because as we all know, and as Erin talked about, the more relevant you are to your constituents in your communication and in your journeys, the better the impact of whatever you're trying to do with your communication streams, be they an ask or an educational piece that you want someone to read. Relevance drives impact. And so this is a double win for an organization like this. And there are a couple of other ones as well that I'll share with you that I loved. These two are terrific examples. On the left here is the Field Museum. It's a regional museum in North America. But they closed down during COVID. And you should definitely go onto their Twitter feed because they have hundreds of these little really cute, exciting 8-second, 15-second concepts where you click a button and then a miniature dinosaur runs across the empty space there. And they're trying to create engagement, something fun, something light. And of course, they are tracking comments across their viewership. And in this particular one, they had nearly 500,000 views just for this 8-second clip. And they do many of them, and they really have engaged with their audience that way. Another example is the Museum of Fine Arts, who've done something even more interesting, and that is they have had specific curated events which people pay for and have a conversation with an expert. So 15, 20 people are having a conversation with this expert who is talking to them about something in the fine arts at a museum in Boston. And again, people register, people pay in this case sometimes, and they then have that engagement and relevance with those people to nurture them moving forward. They have about 50 different courses where they've taken their content and their expertise and engaged online. And it's not just about generating revenue. For these organizations, it's about building engagement and growing their database, their database of high quality individuals. Another way to do that is to live stream. So I know many organizations in the arts and cultural sector who have had physical events, but they have been canceled, have done live stream. And in some cases, they've done both. And they have been extremely successful, much more so than people thought. And of course, you can live stream on most channels, Twitter, Facebook Live, YouTube, and you can be interactive with your supporters. You can make asks through the event. for volunteers, promotions of membership or sponsorships, and donations. The most important thing that people have found with live streaming, of course, is to stream where your audience is, and don't only rely on your existing database as an audience. A lot of these live streaming events through social media and other channels have attracted a much bigger audience, especially when they have made them free. So that's another way to attract. So I'll now switch to a little bit, to switch to another topic, which is obviously a favorite for me, given the fact we supply fundraising software, but also because earned income is decreasing and voluntary income needs to increase in the sector. The more you ask, the more relevant you ask, and the more appropriate your asks are, the more value you'll get as an organization. So virtual hands up, everybody. I can't obviously see you, but I am hopeful that everybody in this audience has done an emergency COVID appeal for their organization. If you haven't, on Monday, you have something to do in the morning, which is great. So you should be immediately thinking about how you can leverage the opportunity that you have with your supporters who are at home, who are engaged with you, to support your organization through these difficult times. So Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens, again, emergency fund, immediately, specifically to help support the zoo through COVID times. But the other thing that is important in an ask, of course, is to be really relevant. And I like this Oregon Zoo example. I don't know why I have a lot of zoo examples. I think it's because I'm an animal lover as well. And all the examples just seem to have come to me from the animal kingdom. So this zoo, the Oregon Zoo, did something really interesting on the left of your screen there. You can see that they actually shared with their audience what percentage of their income is earned income. And obviously that income is dramatically decreased. And then they converted that to an appeal through the COVID crisis and said, help support us and support that earned income, which is dropping. I thought that was terrific. The Oregon Zoo also used social media and peer-to-peer, which I'll come to in a second, to do that. And they had a whole range of different graphics and landing pages and social media examples to drive the message. But the fundamental message was earned income is going down. We need help. We need voluntary income. Donate to us. Another museum, which I thought was a great example, was the National Video Game Museum in the UK. Now, I know that you may think there is no such thing as a National Video Game Museum, but yes, there is, and it is in the UK, and it is not a small institution, I will say. But unfortunately, 90% of their income was earned income. I don't know if it was from kids playing video games, but it's probably from ticket sales and fees from their shops. But it dried up. So they created a peer-to-peer Save the National Video Game Museum. They got some celebrities. They did a lot of outreach in social media. They used their entire database. And in this one campaign, they raised nearly, that's about $300,000 US. So a really effective tool, peer-to-peer fundraising, because they got other people to help them raise money for their cause. So if you're not using peer-to-peer, please think about that. The final item I'll talk about from an ask perspective is something that's pervasive in the UK, growing a lot in the US, and that's Tap to Donate. And with the COVID crisis and social distancing, Tap to Donate is going to be absolutely everywhere. And well, I mean, in the UK, it is pretty much everywhere. I think they may even have a Tap to Donate option in their bathrooms in the UK. They've taken it a little bit too far, but you cannot go to a British arts and cultural institution without the opportunity to Tap to Donate everywhere. And it has proved very effective for them. The only problem that they have with that, which you can all guess, of course, is you don't get the name of the donor. But even that is being worked on by organizations who are using geolocation within the institution to figure out, obviously, with privacy rules in place, who it was that actually made that donation. and they're able to get sometimes get that information. So that's an idea from an ask perspective. If you do not have a tap to donate option in your institution, please think about it. And the final thing I'm going to talk about from an ask perspective before I get into CRM, and just very briefly, is a focus on engagement with major donors. And I'm going to tell a very brief story of an institution in Australia, a small one, but one that's incredibly dear to my heart and relevant. But it all starts with everybody knowing that there's an 80-20 rule, and in the arts and cultural sector in the US, it's more like a 49-1 rule, where 1% of donors make up nearly 49% of all voluntary income to arts and cultural institutions. So while all this technology is great, please don't forget that your engagement with the most important, highest value, highest propensity to give people in your database is absolutely critical. So CarriageWorks is an amazing arts and cultural centre in Sydney. They do thousands of events a year across a variety of venues in this lovely historical building, and they went bankrupt as a result of COVID because they were 95% earned income, and so they just had to close their doors. And so the team at CarriageWorks used their database, used their relationships, and used major giving and corporate giving strategies to actually save the institution. And I guess I say that because with all of the technology and everything that we talk about with CRMs, nothing beats relationships and relationship engagement in the arts and cultural sector. Now, having said that, it's really great to have purpose-built software designed to help you do just that. And so I'll talk about a couple of things in relation to software that may help. Firstly, you absolutely need to invest in your CRM systems and your digital systems. And Erin talked about people and process just brilliantly, but any technology solution is only as good as the people and processes around them. They're also only as good as the data quality, or as we talk about, the data equity, the information that you have in your database that can help you engage and drive revenue moving forward over time. And again, that comes down to people and process. But really, if you think about it, one question you need to ask yourself is, can you monetize the quality of the data in your database? Is it helping you to drive engagement, identify key individuals, benchmark your organization, etc.? And ultimately, is it allowing you to identify engaged constituents, identify constituents whose engagement changes, and to be tailored to your target audience? But above all, I will say that even with great software, even with great ideas, it's really the culture of your organization that drives your success. And when people talk about culture beating strategy, nothing is more true than in this space. Technology, data, innovation, conflict, failure, these are the cultural ideas that will allow you to perform successfully in a world where COVID has changed the rules. You need to be willing to test. You need to be open to failing fast. You'll need to be open to encouraging positive conflict around fundraising ideas. You need to be open to be intellectually curious within your organization and coming to events like this, and of course, questioning norms. And if you do all of those things, I am confident that your organization and the entire arts and cultural sector in your region will flourish. So thank you so much for allowing me to present today. I have a couple of links to some great resources that Blackbaud offers. We offer hundreds of white papers, case studies, and other things that can help you understand best practice in the sector. And I encourage you to take a look at those if you'd like to do so. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Kevin. That was a wonderful presentation. And I think also wonderfully complementary to Erin's earlier presentation. I had a couple of things that occurred to me during it. I mean, you were highlighting some of those emergency campaigns that certain institutions have mounted in response to the current financial challenges they have around their earned revenue. I'm very curious though. Do you actually know the quantum? I mean, if we take, for example, the Oregon Zoo. I mean, that was a beautiful campaign when they were revealing how much they rely on their earned revenue in a normal year, and then that corresponding pie chart that showed how much of that actually goes to animal welfare. You know, like 75, looked like 75%, almost 70% of their entire budget is actually taking care of the animals, which obviously means something tremendously profound to the people who are likely to be their regular visitors and their regular supporters. But I am curious to know whether the campaign, the sort of emergency philanthropy campaigns can actually compensate for, you know, how much of the lost revenue can actually be regained through that.
Well, I mean, my personal view is it can't be all regained. I mean, that's an unrealistic target, but some of it can be regained, and the only way to know is to try and to test. And I'm pretty sure the Oregon Zoo tried a number of different approaches. That was the one that they certainly talked about as being the most successful. That linkage of you know, what we need, where it came from, where it goes to, and how you can help. That very specific ask has become incredibly powerful in the not-for-profit sector, right across the sector, but in arts and cultural in particular. I mean, we've seen, we track ticket sales through our solutions as well as voluntary income as well. And we have seen a reasonable increase, about 25% increase in voluntary income from the arts and cultural sector over the last 6 months, as those organizations are asking their supporters to fund them from a volunteer perspective as opposed to an earned income perspective.
But also, do you sense though, Kevin, of that, you know, I can imagine that those organizations are talking to their existing very loyal supporters. Do you know whether the bulk of that support is coming from the people who are normally sort of at the top end of their donor list? You know, is it really the big generous givers who are stepping forward to fill that gap, or is it a large number of small donations from people?
That's a great question. It depends on the institution, obviously, but overall, it's more of everyone. But if you do get more of those large gifts, they relatively tend to outweigh, you know, a few more of the smaller gifts. But it's not just that. I mean, a lot of these organizations are using this opportunity to grow engagement and to build their database. Because the bigger the database that you have, the more relevant the information you have about your potential donors over time, you know, that will help you long into the future. So we're finding really interesting stats about, because we track database size growth, and arts and cultural institutions are significantly growing their databases at this time by engaging with people outside of their normal sphere of influence, you know, from either geographic perspective or age and gender perspective.
Yeah, because I had you know, that there is a perception that at a time when there are enormous pressures at virtually every level of society, and all of the traditional sources of philanthropic funding are actually being requested to support really grassroots levels of health and well-being and social welfare, which are, of course, you know, that you have to say that those areas must take a certain priority at a time like this. I wonder whether there's so much competition for the philanthropic funds that the arts and culture sector might actually be taking a backseat ride, and some of us are wondering whether it's really appropriate for us to be stepping out there into an incredibly congested sort of market.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question to ask, and a dilemma, and I will share my perspective and the perspective of some of the other experts that I work with, and that is, you know, you can't make the decision for your supporter as to whether they want to support you or not, unless you don't ask them. right? Then you can make the decision. But if you ask them, from our perspective, there's very little chance you're going to upset them and they're not going to give in the future. The only thing they can do is not give, and then it's their choice, and they're making the decision on where they want to give. But if you don't ask, and don't ask in the best possible way, you'll never know. And so we found that organizations right across the not-for-profit sector who have had that exact view, you know, we're not sure, we don't know, let's not do it. When they have done it, and they have done it in an engaged and thoughtful and considerate way, they have got great outcomes. So I would encourage you to try.
Yeah, and I'd like to bring Erin back into the conversation now. Erin, I wondered, you know, Kevin has shared with us a few specific examples where we've seen organizations suddenly mobilizing in a different direction in order to shore up support. And I just wonder whether that's also been your experience, or whether you could share any experiences that you've become aware of through your own work.
You know, I've been so impressed, and certainly in the arts, we are creative, right? And so if it's time to be creative. There are lots of organizations who have paused and changed direction to either make available their program, being the live stream examples that Kevin talked about, or to be inventive in other ways. I think that one of the organizations that has impressed me the most is the Dallas Opera, which they have invented an entire media presence, which they call the TDO network. And they have absolutely invented more than entire streams of programming, using their resources to start to address some of the themes that are happening, right? We have a pandemic, we have, in the States anyway, we have the social and racial justice issues which are happening. And, you know, they are using all of their resources to really think of themselves as a media company, right? And think of the digital stage as a place where they deeply engage with audiences. I think the last time I heard, since March, they have more than 9 million views, and from nothing have invented this whole presence. We are also aware of, you know, pretty much any organization that isn't changing right now is at risk of failure, actually. And so, you know, you hope that those organizational structures are moving forward across the entire sector, is what you hope for.
Well, that example you gave of the Dallas Opera, it sort of relates to one of the questions that's come in about, you know, noting that are there any examples other than industries like the zoo that where arts and cultural organizations could learn from? I'm curious about, like, for example, the Dallas Opera is an arts and culture organization. In their new emphasis on actually, you know, distributing their performances online, do you happen to know if they've been able to really convert that into a meaningful revenue stream?
Absolutely. Boston Symphony Orchestra in particular has developed, they're using all of their live stream, and then they have technology embedded in that live stream to collect donations during the live stream. And, you know, those voluntary donations are kind of impulse, you know, is that the new digital ticket? Like, yeah. We don't know yet. We're all inventing this language as we go.
I love that idea of, you know, being encouraged to give a donation, because the flute solo in that Bruckner Symphony was so great. You want to hit on the Give Now button.
That's exactly what it is. And in their case, they had James Taylor, who's a very famous artist here, holding a cardboard sign with a QR code on it. And so that was even drawing more people in, you know. And I think that, you know, as Kevin said, you have to be willing to experiment right now. You have to be willing to experiment. And, you know, the arts themselves are imperative to our future evolution as humans. I think it allows us to be inspired and to move forward as humanity. And so I encourage all of these efforts. But yeah, Boston Symphony Orchestra would be one for everybody to take a look at.
maybe I can just come back to Kevin. You know, apart from the example of a zoo, which I think, you know, for us is it's a completely refreshing perspective. Are there other industries across the whole portfolio that Blackbaud has, you know, globally? Can you think of other industries that might be able to show some examples of a very creative approach to these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, look, it really spans the entire sector. I mean, we've had universities who are researching a COVID vaccine. You know, one University of Queensland, you know, they decided to spin up a peer-to-peer program and put a lot of their researchers online to give lectures and talks and, you know, show examples of what happens in the lab, make it really interactive. And they've raised millions of dollars from that. We've had environmental charities like WWF, for example, who have really had a challenging time in this space. Use their distribution network, should I say, but the work they do in the fields to get closer to their donor audiences and offer people live streams into the natural habitats that they're trying to support. And part of it is because people are at home, like people are so bored, they can't get out, they can't engage. And so a lot of our customers are trying to bring the experience that they have back into the homes of individuals. But the biggest, I think, thing for us has been peer-to-peer, particularly in the UK. I think many of you will know Captain Tom, who raised like 60 million pounds through one of our platforms just by doing a walk. And he was encouraged to do that by the charity. So it's really endorsed by the charity. And so peer-to-peer for us has been hugely valuable, especially moving it to virtual.
We're getting a few questions. Actually, there's a bit of a theme coming through a couple of the questions on the subject of CRM. And there's a couple of the questions really refer to, you know, it might be relatively easy for the larger organizations to be able to invest in the development of a elaborate CRM program. But what about small to medium companies? And how can they possibly you know, take full advantage of this technology because it needs to be so well resourced? And that's really a question for both of you.
Well, I'll start. I mean, it's very simple. You can get into the CRM space either through our solutions or some other solutions that offer 10 free licenses like Salesforce for a very limited budget. You know, for the equivalent of 5,000 to 6,000 Australian dollars, your organization could be up and running in quite a sophisticated CRM from a fundraising perspective. If you're doing ticket sales and gift shops and other things, it gets more complicated. But if you're an arts organization in Hong Kong and Singapore, you need to start. I mean, you absolutely have to start building equity in your database and understand your donors. And there are tools out there and systems out there that are very low cost and low maintenance that can get you engaged. So there is no organization too small to start building a comprehensive CRM strategy, from my perspective.
Erin, I wanted to ask you the same question, but also I'm conscious that in the case of Tessitura, there have been examples where a number of companies have perhaps banded together to be able to invest in Tessitura, and I just wondered whether that's a possible solution that you think is viable.
You know, the point of CRM is to connect customers to your mission. And so whatever size and scale your mission is how the level to which you want to bring them together and increase their engagement with your organization. CRM is a tool to do that. We have organizations that use Tessitura that have literally 6 people. And especially now that organizations are so downsized, you know, 5 people are using our CRM. You know, I think that as I'm actually struck by what Kevin said about increasing data equity. You already have lists of customers. You already have lists of sort of the people that are engaging with you. Thinking through how you want to next engage them is really your next step along the CRM journey. So
actually, Erin, you really just highlighted basically the next question that was coming up. We, just in the interest of full disclosure to our wide audience, Kevin, Erin, and I had the opportunity for a chat a few days ago. One of the challenges that Hong Kong organizations face is the rather antiquated ticketing system and the unavailability of customer data. And there also, I think, occasionally we hit a bit of a firewall where the data privacy line is trotted out. I think that I don't necessarily want to go down the pathway of looking at the different data privacy legislations in different jurisdictions, but I wondered, are you? There must be some really brilliant, clever ways of bypassing clunky old ticketing systems to be able to have established that direct relationship with your customer. And yes. I wondered whether, Erin, you may have some examples, and whether Kevin could comment as well.
There are two questions in the Q&A, and the answer is sort of the same. And you want to start engaging, exactly as you said, directly with your customers. So you want to be thinking about survey tools. You want to be thinking about quality and satisfaction survey tools. If someone attended, may we contact you to get your advice and feedback on your experience with us? And you invite people to self-identify. If you think back to that map, self-identification doesn't have to be at the time of purchase. Self-identification can be whenever you are identifying yourself to the organization through voluntary participation with a particular survey, and you can design that survey however you want. People who step forward in that way, then you do have their information, and they know that you're going to contact them, and they understand the social contract of that. There was a question about changing the ecology, and I think that you really have to look at the root cause, which is the social contract, to participate and communicate directly with the customers.
Kevin, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I'll just add briefly. I mean, if the ticketing systems are antiquated and you're not able to engage constituents from the ticketing process, you have to bypass it. It's quite simple, and so you have to find ways of identifying people to engage with the organization without them buying a ticket. And I think I've presented about 15 of those today already. So you've got really a great opportunity now to build your audience. The challenge, of course, is then when they come and buy a ticket, you don't know that they've bought a ticket and engaged otherwise because you don't have that connection. But it's a good start. I mean, once you start engaging with individuals outside the ticketing system to build a relationship, that's a great first step. And there are many, many ways to do that, social media being probably one of the most important.
Well, I'm conscious that we're out of time. I did have one final question for Kevin. I know that you're something of an expert on tea, and if you found yourself in a situation where it's the middle of the night in Chicago, you're about to go to bed, what would you recommend for Erin to have a cup of before she goes to bed now?
Well, I mean, given the audience, and I apologize for my pronunciation of it, but my favorite teas are Peru teas, and I would recommend a nice tea that will help you improve your digestion and sleep well and wake up refreshed.
Okay, well, on that note, I'm very grateful. I'm sure I'm expressing the applause and thanks of everybody who's been online watching this session. To Erin Koppel and to Kevin Sher, thank you so much for your time and for your fantastic presentations and sharing your insights. And also thank you to Hong Kong AAA for hosting this session. Thank you very much.